What the hell just happened? That was all the SEAL commander could blurt out when he saw the faded tattoo on the old gunslinger's wrist. No one in the barracks knew who Eli Warren was. He lived like a shadow, repairing weapons as a monotonous routine. But in just 17 seconds, he had diagnosed the faulty Barrett rifle that had stumped the entire technical team. And then, the trident tattoo on his neck, 3 stars, and the inscription Silent Hawk revealed themselves. The commander's face went pale. Those who had been in combat understood immediately. This was no mere gunsmith. This was the ghost who survived a wiped-out operation, the man who, by all rights, should no longer exist. No one knew where he came from. No military records, no rank, no one to usher him into the base. One winter morning, he appeared in Fort Elridge's armory, like a shard of time blown back. Salt-tan pepper hair peeking from under a worn leather patrol cap, a faded field jacket indistinguishable in color from years of use. He stepped into the armory without knocking or greeting, bowed his head, and began cleaning a Remington 700 as if tending the grave of an old comrade. His name was Eli Warren, a name that rang out yet was forgotten, appearing without explanation and disappearing without question. They called him Old Eli, like a shadow tree in the barracks yard present, yet unseen. He lived alone in a dilapidated wooden shack behind warehouse number 3, at the edge of the perimeter fence where only sand-laden wind and passing military vehicles stirred the silence. His hut was so low he could barely stand upright inside, yet its single bulb burned night and day. No one ever entered. No one dared knock. Each morning, before the barracks reveille sounded, Eli rose from his cot. No greeting, no witness, only the scuffed trails of his faded combat boots marking the dew-damp earth. At 4:45 a.m., he ran exactly 3 laps around the compound, neither fast nor slow, each stride measured, each breath precise, as if replaying a memory that would never let him rest. The gate guard recalled, "I once saw him standing motionless before the half-staff flag at 5 a.m. No salute, no head bow, just standing as if trapped in an order that had never been rescinded." Inside the armory, Eli spoke little, but everyone knew. If your weapon clicked and rattled for no reason, leave it on Eli's bench overnight, and by morning, everything would be flawless. No one understood how he worked. His hands bore no diagnostic tool, no electronic meter, only an old screwdriver, a roll of shop towels, and a gaze as sharp as a sniper's sight through mist. The young soldiers mocked him as the old screw-turner, a Cold War mechanic. Yet oddly, no one dared touch a rifle Eli had just serviced. Not out of fear of him, but out of reverence, as if handling something sacred. His hands were calloused, his thumbs slightly curled, a mark of someone who had squeezed triggers too long, yet his movements were as delicate as a surgeon's. He traced each stress fracture in metal like caressing the bones of a fallen comrade. To him, every rifle was not a tool, but a relic, every round not a munition, but a consequence. At lunch break, he sat alone on a wooden bench outside, gazing downrange where recruits were learning to aim. He never smiled. Yet sometimes someone glimpsed a faint nod so slight it almost went unnoticed, as if he had seen those faces before. On a night raid, in a dust-choked trench, in a memory never permitted to be shared. Curious souls asked about his past. He would answer, voice hushed like shifting sand, "I'm here because they didn't know where else to send me." One day, a critical malfunction grounded an M40A5 sniper rifle, and the tech team was stumped. In 11 minutes, Eli not only fixed it, but even pinpointed a manufacturing design flaw. When asked how he knew, he looked at no one and replied, "I once held a nameless street, silent with this rifle, for 6 hours straight." After that, they no longer called him a mere mechanic. They called him something undefinable. But then what happens when a small tattoo on his wrist is unexpectedly revealed and a SEAL officer recognizes what everyone had long forgotten?
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
First Lieutenant Jacob McCrae was the kind of man who walked into a room and changed its atmosphere. At 36, he'd been through 8 deployments, 4 combat zones, and had been wounded twice, though only superficially. His gaze was cold, his voice decisive, and his right hand always wore a half-finger glove, even indoors. As the lead trainer of the new SEAL team, McCrae believed he knew everything a man needed to survive under fire. To McCrae, Eli Warren was merely a wrinkle in the well-oiled machinery of the base. A civilian gunsmith retained for some inscrutable reason in the records no one dared ask why. McCrae disdained ambiguity, and Eli epitomized everything that couldn't be defined by specs or scorecards. He didn't belong here. That was McCrae's one certainty. Suspicion turned to irritation when, one morning, a Chaytak M200, the cutting-edge sniper rifle newly delivered from the factory, malfunctioned badly. Its aim was off. Recoil uneven. Bolt action jerky. The tech team fumbled. McCrae seethed. Then, as if deliberately unleashing his frustration, he personally carried the rifle to Eli's bench. Without knocking, without greeting, he set the M200 down on the wooden work table, the clack echoing through the oil and steel-scented shop. He planted a hand on his hip, challenge in his stare. His expression radiated that arrogance honed in combat, an arrogance that needed no volume to make you feel judged. Eli paused mid-clean of an M4A1. He looked up at McCrae for several seconds, not with anger or fear, but with the look of a man long accustomed to being misjudged. Saying nothing, he set aside the M4 and drew the Chaytak toward him. He released each latch, removed each screw, needing neither gauges nor manuals. His fingers moved as if memorized every component, as though each bolt and piston were pieces of his own body severed, now being reassembled. No one dared breathe deeply. Something in the way he touched the rifle felt more like a ritual than a routine repair. Eli halted when his finger brushed the scope mount. He closed his eyes, then turned a tiny adjustment screw. A soft metallic click followed, precise and final. "The mount was off by 1 degree, he said quietly, still not looking up. "The locking lug is worn unevenly. Someone adjusted it to misalign the shot." McCrae froze. In that moment, it wasn't the words that sent chills down his spine, but the voice. Not the seasoned timbre of a mechanic, but the weight of memory, low, dry, heavy as an alarm in the dead of night. He looked closer. The abrasion on Eli's jacket shoulder, the kind of scrape you get dragging yourself over rocky sand. The gaze neither panicked nor hostile, but dangerously serene. And the voice bearing a timbre strangely familiar, very familiar. The last time McCrae had heard that voice was during a border region operation, when his final teammate whispered into his earpiece, "Hold your position. Only shoot when I say." Back then, McCrae never knew the name of the man who'd saved him from an ambush. But he remembered that voice, not hurried, not loud, because it came from someone who never fired without purpose. Now Eli Warren sat before him, and in mere minutes the Chaytak had been restored to a state neither the factory nor the tech team could achieve. McCrae said nothing, but inside, a hypothesis took shape, a possibility that, if true, meant everything they thought they knew about the old gunsmith was a fragile facade. And if that hypothesis was correct, who was Eli Warren, really? Wait a moment, I have a small request for you. Please hit like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy inspiring stories. And don't forget to leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you live. I always find it wonderful to see the world come together, just to share a meaningful moment. The silence after Eli repaired the Chaytak did not dissipate immediately. It settled into the furtive glances and the vague wariness of those who had once mocked him. But for Lieutenant McCrae, it became a heavy suspicion in his heart, persistent as the echo of a missed shot. That night he could not sleep. Instead of returning to the officers' quarters, McCrae went back to the logistics office, which had access to the internal military archives. Under the pale blue glow of the screen, he typed the phrase, "Silent Hawk," a name he had heard whispered during training, an old call sign like an untold legend. At first, the system returned nothing, but after navigating several security layers and entering an access code he used only for missing person files, a document appeared. It contained no photos, no names, no medical records, or discharge papers. Only a red code. Sele, Ops 203 Bird Classified. Below it were 3 lines. Operation, Green Basin, Helmand AO. Status, unknown. Notes, lost contact. Only one signal received within 72 hours, then complete blackout. Green Basin. Just that name sent chills down McCrae's spine. It was a region wiped from the map in 2012, where an entire SEAL team had been deployed to dismantle an armed network, and none returned. No press coverage, no funerals, a mission erased even from public records, but internal rumors held that one man survived. One who crawled through sand, blood, and corpses, bandaged himself, navigated out alone, and no one ever saw his face. He was called Hawk for his observation skills and silent because no one heard his voice over the radio. McCrae opened further scanned notes from classified documents. One crumpled page, ink faded, hand sketched the tattoo on the inner wrist. 3 small stars, a broken trident, with Silent Hawk, call sign unverified, beneath. No signature. No accountable authority. But the drawing was carved sharp as a blade, clear enough to send another chill through McCrae. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Memories from that Afghan border mission surged unexpectedly. That night, after his unit was ambushed, McCrae was gravely wounded and trapped in a slit in the rock. He thought he would die, no comms, no light. Then, a Glock was pitched from the darkness, landing next to his hand, and a voice crackled in his nearly dead headset. "Only move when I say so. Otherwise, stay still." The voice was low, calm, unnaturally so amid the hell around him. He had never shared this with anyone, because no one would believe it. The official report stated that McCrae had fought his way out and been rescued by helicopter. No witnesses. But he knew he had not been alone. Now, all the pieces fit. That voice, that calm gaze, the way Eli adjusted the Chaytak without reference materials, the movements of someone who had lived with a weapon not in a shop, but in a death zone. And that tattoo could not be a coincidence. Eli was Silent Hawk, the sole man to escape Green Basin. The man never recognized. No medals, no press, no funerals for his teammates, only more than a decade of silence. And now he lived like a shadow in the barracks, cleaning guns, repairing scopes, carrying secrets a nation chose to forget. McCrae did not seek him out immediately. He sat all night in his vehicle, watching the pale yellow light spilling from the armory's doorway. The wind bit cold, but he left the window down. In his heart, for the first time in years of combat, there was neither anger nor pride, but a silent gratitude, and an oddly small feeling. And he knew, when the sun rose, he would have to face the man who had once saved him both with a gun and with silence. There are wounds that don't bleed, yet smolder for a lifetime. And for McCrae, the name Silent Hawk was never a legend. It was a cut that wouldn't heal in his family's history. His brother Reuben McCrae had been part of the task force sent to Green Basin. That was his brother's final mission. No one on that team ever returned. The McCrae family received only a brief letter from the Department of Defense. Missing in action. No body, no answers, no grave. Just a void where memories became an ember burning the family in silence. McCrae grew up in his brother's shadow. A legend without a face, a story never finished. He carried it into every campaign, every training exercise, every restless dream between deployments. And then, the name Silent Hawk became the cipher for that unnamed loss, the only man to return from where Reuben had gone and never come back. When McCrae realized Eli was Silent Hawk, his first feeling was not surprise, nor respect. It was anger. A deep, cold, bitter rage like gravel in his throat. He was still alive. Walking, breathing, eating soup in a small shack, cleaning guns, sleeping. While Reuben, the brother who'd written weekly letters, the one who taught McCrae to shoot using a broom handle in place of an M4, had vanished into the silent land no one would mention. One weekend afternoon, unable to bear it any longer, McCrae strode into the armory. He didn't knock. He didn't say a word. He simply stood in the dim light, watching the man seated at the wooden bench, quietly cleaning a rifle as he did every day. Eli didn't look up, but his hands stilled. McCrae stepped closer, then stopped halfway. His knuckles whitened around the pistol grip of his anger. Finally, as if he could no longer contain himself, he dropped to his knees on the cold concrete right beside the bench. No one spoke for a moment. Only the wind, whistling through a crack in the door, and the heavy heartbeat of a man who'd worn body armor but never learned to shield his heart. Then, in a breathless whisper almost to himself, McCrae murmured, "I wanted to believe you were someone else, because if you are Eli Hawk, then that means my brother chose to die, so you could live." The words fell like a stone shattering a still lake. Eli still did not look up. He placed his calloused hand on the wooden bench among screwdrivers and metal fragments, then spoke softly, almost inaudibly. "I wasn't the one he tried to save. I was just near him when it happened." There were no sobs, no reconciliatory embrace. Only the truth, silent, raw, lying between two men who had nothing left to lose. And in that moment, what melted away was not hatred, but something heavier and more enduring, the shared guilt of two survivors. One who had lived too long, the other living with an unbearable loss. No one won. No one was right or wrong, and neither had the standing to forgive the other. Only one thing was certain. From that moment on, they were no longer strangers. Not because they understood each other, but because they shared something no one else in that base could grasp: the price of survival. And from that silence, something began to change. Dear viewers, please take a moment to relax or pour yourself a glass of water, and then continue listening to the story. There are more surprising developments ahead. Comment 1 if you enjoyed the story, so we know you're still here. Fort Elridge, in the early days of autumn, wore a distinctive gray not from the sky, but in the eyes of those who had known war as reality. On such a morning, Brigadier General Leona Briggs, the rare woman to have survived Operation Marja, entered the armory where Eli Warren was carefully cleaning an old Dragunov as though trying to listen to the heartbeat of the past. She offered no introduction, gave no orders. She simply stood by the half-open door, looking at the man before her as if she had found what she had been seeking for years. "I want you to teach the new sniper class," she said. her voice hoarse from cigarettes and late-night briefings. "They don't need a curriculum. They need to survive." Eli showed no surprise. He set the Dragunov down as one might lay an infant who had just stopped breathing into a cradle. After a few seconds of silence, he spoke only one sentence. "I teach my way. No photos. No badges." Briggs nodded. Not another word. The class began on Monday. 12 trainees, young soldiers brimming with confidence, masters of theory, and enamored with technology, entered the special training area at the edge of the base. They expected briefing boards, syllabi, tactical simulations. Instead, they found a man in civilian clothes without a name tag or loudspeaker. On the first day, Eli handed each soldier an M24 and pointed to a target 800 yards away amid a stand of reeds. No instructions, no stopwatch, no commands. They fired. Most shots missed. A few hit the target's edge. Eli said nothing. He merely stood behind them, observing, taking notes, and remaining silent. On the second day, they shot again, this time with wind. No one hit the target. Frustration grew. Some asked why there was no guidance. Eli still offered no answer. By the third day, one trainee misfired and asked to reload. Eli placed his hand on the rifle stock, quietly removed the last round, then handed the trainee a small note. "If you don't understand your mistake, no amount of ammunition will help." On the fourth day, one soldier quit. On the fifth, another argued and was eliminated. No harsh words, no raised voices, only repeated failure and a silence that allowed no excuses. By the sixth day, only 6 remained. On the eve of the final exam, Eli let them prepare themselves. No maps, no briefing, only a mock terrain sketch and one mission. Identify the correct target without causing civilian casualties under emergency conditions. On test morning, a light drizzle fell. 3 withdrew, citing lack of confidence. One shooter hit the target, but then discovered it had been partially obscured, likely a civilian. He bowed his head and removed the range flag from his rifle. No one asked. No one reminded. Eli stepped forward. He looked into the soldier's eyes and offered a single nod, slow, firm, and weighty. "Knowing when not to squeeze the trigger," he said softly, "is worth more than making the shot." In the end, only 3 were retained. No medals, no ceremony. They received only a small, unmarked brown cloth tab with no explanation. But they understood, and from that day on, the young soldiers who had known only victory began to learn how to survive, not with their weapons but with silence as taught by the man who led them. 2 weeks after the training course ended, Eli Warren vanished. No one saw him leave the base. No transfer papers, no signatures. He arrived like a silent wind and departed as if he had never been there. Yet the armory where he had lived, as if it were his own flesh, was unusually tidy. Every rifle was neatly lined up, polished to a shine. No old oil stains marred the floor. No trace of smoke lingered in the air. Everything had been cleaned with the respect of someone who knew this would be the last time. On the familiar wooden workbench, under the quiet glow of the overhead lamp, sat an old wooden box. McCrae was the first to find it. He did not open it immediately. His hand rested on the lid for almost a minute, as if afraid that whatever lay inside would prevent him from ever returning to how things were before. When he finally lifted the lid, there was no letter, only 3 items. A spent bullet fragment, split in 2, its copper surface aged as though it had once rested within a weapon somewhere beyond memory. A ballistic target plate with a single, perfectly centered hole, not an inch off, and a faded photograph of 3 soldiers seated around a campfire in the desert, their dust-streaked jackets their eyes not on the camera but gazing toward a place no one could name. McCrae did not need to ask names. He recognized one of them as his brother. The second was Eli, and the third, perhaps, was no longer among the living. He sat down in Eli's old chair, placed the photograph on the table, and let the memory seep in like morning mist. No farewell words, no parting badge. But in his heart he knew Eli had not abandoned them, only retreated to a place where the world could no longer harm him. 3 months later, a quiet announcement appeared on the military's internal network. An anonymous funding foundation emerged, no public registrations, no spokesperson called the Silent Hawk Foundation. No one knew its founders. But the foundation began doing exactly what Eli had always done, supporting trainees with PTSD, sending the best scopes to units in the desert, sponsoring young officers for unofficial sniper courses, and, most importantly, keeping the marksman's conscience from being forgotten. No one signed the paperwork, but McCrae knew. Bell, the veteran medic who once sutured Eli's wounds in silence, knew. Leona Briggs knew. And anyone who had ever been under a rifle scope that Eli had tuned by hand knew. That teacher was still there, watching over, safeguarding, quietly correcting whatever had veered off center. One winter morning, a biting wind swept over the old hill behind Fort Elridge. McCrae climbed it, no rifle, no armor, just a faded khaki jacket and a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. He stood silently, gazing down the firing range where a solitary, seasoned figure strode steadily through the thin layer of snow. No cameras, no flags. Yet McCrae raised his hand in salute, perhaps for the first time, and perhaps for the last. Eli did not look back, but his stride shifted one gentle pause, then on again as if acknowledging the salute without needing words. And McCrae understood. Not all legacies rest on tombstones or in museum halls. Some endure by ceasing to exist, like the perfect strike of an unfired bullet, like the gunsmith's hand whose name no one knows, like a teacher who needs no title. A legacy sometimes is not what you leave behind, it's what you never have to say yet everyone feels. Not every survivor wishes to be remembered, and not every hero needs the spotlight. Eli Warren or Silent Hawk reminds us that sometimes the greatest courage is to continue on in silence with losses unseen by any eye. He needed no acclamation, only the knowledge that he had left something true and enough. This story is not only about war, but about humanity, about unseen choices, about loyalty that transcends rank, and forgiveness that asks no apology. It is a legacy no organization must archive, only held in the hearts of those who were touched. If this story reminds you of someone who sacrificed in silence, please leave a comment below. Name them, or simply leave a dot to let them know they are not invisible. Thank you for joining this journey. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video with those who need to hear it. Because sometimes, a story told at the right moment is also a way to heal.